Hello team, this is another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP, a US politics kind of extra video. I'm going to have a little chat about what's been happening in the US political landscape for the last 24 hours since I did a mammoth live with you yesterday. It's quite a fast moving storyline. The Biden stepping down, Harris taking over. Where's that all at? What's it looking like with regard to Trump and his campaign, with Trump and Vance against potentially, probably Harris and another. Right, we'll start with just that warning. Like I've said to you already today, there is always the threat of disinformation. We need to be really careful. Here's that example I spoke about this morning, which is a guy called Joey Manarino, just a regular US influencer, a MAGA influencer, here being caught accidentally not logging out of his own account before he logged into his sock puppets account. So it's like a fake account, sort of like Russian trolls have. We need to watch out for this happening from Russia a lot with their normal troll activity, but it happens in our own nations with people having sock puppets and doing the work of influencing nefariously. Here, Joey Manarino, as a white man, is pretending to be a black woman, but doesn't log out of his white man's account and logs into his and then puts a black woman's tweet out, and then has to delete it. But don't worry, it's been caught by the internet. And of course, you know, I'm a true black American woman, and I've been black all my life. I was born black and I will die black. My mummy black, my daddy black. I will never cast a ballot for that Kamala Harris woman as long as I live. Trump all the way, all day, every day. Now, when you see things like this, especially like I said to you this morning, if it introduces the tweet or the status or whatever with an identifier, it's often the case that it's a troll. Like, as a whatever, I used to vote this, but now I vote this, and I will never go back. And it's the same sort of approach you see all the time. If you see something like that, you just know it is disinformation. But anyway, let's move on. Although I had another tweet concerning that. Here we have deleted. This post has been deleted. Who knew? Right, okay. Another example of disinformation that's going around concerns Joe Biden and his stepping down and getting COVID and going back to his home and resting there. Now, OSINT Defender has been talking about this a couple of times over the last 24 hours because I find this interesting, because he was thrown up as someone to follow concerning. So he started with the Ukraine war, then went on to the Israel-Gaza conflict as well. And Elon Musk picked up his commentary because he's quite pro-Israel. And he got into Elon Musk's good book, and Elon Musk said he's a guy you should follow. But actually, a few times recently, OSINT Defender's been getting really annoyed with how bad Twitter is at disinformation, at sorting out disinformation. And it's terrible. It's gone right downhill because Elon Musk doesn't really care about disinformation. In fact, he likes it when it suits him. And here's a really interesting example that OSINT Defender got onto, which is and there have been several claims about Joe Biden being ill and getting COVID, and lots of claims that he's just about to die, and so on and so forth. Even claims similar to that from Trump himself. But anyway, a massive amount of garbage posts like this have been spread and amplified by Twitter over the last 24 hours. It's absolutely insane. Here's Global Press saying, breaking, a verified source has informed the Global Press team that Joe Biden is currently in hospice care and is unlikely to survive the night. And of course, he then came out, was on telephone address with Kamala Harris when she gave her live press conference. And he was fine. He sounded a bit hoarse, like he had COVID. Who knew? And then he had Laura Loomer. Laura Loomer is just an egregious, basically super right winger. And by super right winger, I mean like actual fascist person. Like, she's not a good human being at all. But she was at the RNC. She's been allowed into the Overton window as what is now acceptable. And like starting to talk to David Duke of the KKK, starts getting that Overton window shifted to like, oh, it's okay to speak to outright racists now and accept them into the political discourse. Okay. And like, oh, freedom of speech. But what happens is a mere exposure effect, that the more you say things, the more credible they become. So you start allowing people to say overtly racist things over and over and over, then it becomes acceptable to say racist things because of the mere exposure effect. And then you start getting in all of these lunatics on the fringe. They become mainstream thinkers, not that they think too much, and part of the mainstream commentariat. Okay, so an example of this would be Don Trump Jr. saying, I think Alex Jones should be the press secretary for the White House if my father gets in. You're like, Alex Jones is nuts. He denied Sandy Hook happened, got took to court, obviously, because it's complete nonsense that could be some kind of conspiracy theory. And then he lost, and he's basically been bankrupted by that, and he spreads conspiracy theories still, and he's an absolute nut job. He's just a complete brain fart of a human being. And yet Don Trump Jr. is like, yeah, let's have this guy in as our press secretary. And it's just, seriously? Anyway, it's now acceptable to have these people around. Well, Laura Loomer yesterday said, breaking, there is an FAA flight restriction that just went up in Wilmington, Delaware, where Joe Biden lives. The flight restriction is for VIP movement. This coincides with presidential movement. Joe Biden's health is declining rapidly, and as I reported today, he is now on a terminal stage of his illness. Today, Joe Biden's chief of staff held an emergency meeting with all the White House staff. Okay. Or there was a flight restriction because the vice president was landing in Wilmington to give a talk to the campaign staff live on television. And as she is a vice president, she gets quite a lot of protection. And now as a presumptive nominee for the presidential race for the Democrats, she is going to be afforded FAA flight restriction protection. That's why the flight was stopped, you absolute numpty. Anyway, OSINT Defender rightfully says, claims to know about a secret terminal illness that Biden has, but doesn't know that the NOTAM in Delaware is for, that's the no-fly zone site, is for Harris's meeting with her new campaign team in Wilmington. Tell me again, how is she an investigative journalist? That's Laura Loomer. So OSINT Defender rightly calling out these people, and eventually I think Global Press deleted their one, and then OSINT Defender said, well, about time, why hasn't Laura Loomer deleted hers? It's like people getting found out by, reality. But the sad state of affairs is you've got Donald Trump saying Biden never had COVID, he's a threat to democracy. It's not over tomorrow, crooked Joe Biden's going to wake up and forget he dropped out the race today. But it's an interesting kind of joke point at the top. It's not really a joke. If I got shot and nobody cared a week later, I too would be spiraling. It's a really important point here that, and I mentioned this on the live stream with Prof. Gerdis yesterday, that, do you know what? There was an assassination attempt on the president of the former president of the United States. And it happened a week ago, and already everyone's forgotten. Like, broadly speaking, the shock of that has been displaced by Biden stepping down, Harris taking over, things going on. And actually, it didn't have the lasting effect. Not that you would plan that to have an effect, but people were expecting that this would make Trump a shoo-in, right? He'd get a massive bump, and then you'd have the bump of the RNC as well. So you add assassination attempt, RNC bump that you always get. You always get your own convention bump. Trump should be absolutely mullering it in the polls, but actually he's not. There seems to be relatively little shift in the polls, which is itself a very interesting reflection on how paper thin Trump's advantages are, or his lead is. I would argue, like, there was not a significant shift there. And that we've forgotten that assassination attempt. I'm not belittling it, morally speaking, like it's an egregious thing. But actually what happened is we've now found out that the kid had designs on shooting at the DNC as well, at the Democrat National committee convention. Like, he had been Googling that. He had explosives in the car. He was from a family that had been putting out Trump signs outside their house. That the father was a 99 point whatever percent like pro GOP man based on his gun ownership and hunting proclivities, according to a GOP open source evaluation of people living in Butler, for example, in Pennsylvania. So yeah, it appears that it's got to be remembered that Crooks was a registered Republican and had been, according to friends at school or people at Newman School, had always sided conservatives. So the point being that this guy was not shooting Trump because he was some kind of avid Democrat. He was shooting Trump because he's some kind of crazed young child or young man that has ended up doing something utterly egregious, but not for political reasons. And so that means that the Republicans effectively were unable to capitalize on that in order to take advantage of the fact or the notion that, or the initial claim that this was a Democrat thing, it was Biden that caused this. And of course, everyone's gone silent on that, not only because Biden stepped down, but actually because there's no way you can connect Biden's rhetoric to some child doing that. And then you had Trump saying, well, okay, we're going to have unity. And now he's just completely non-unity. And you've got him and J.D. Vance. Today, you had the Ohio... you had a speech, a J.D. Vance speech, and before J.D. Vance, I think it was the Ohio senator saying, watch out, we're going to have a civil war. It's like, hang on, 1 week ago you were talking about having unity here and healing the country and blah, blah, blah. And now you are advocating civil war with some of your speech. Like, who are the people that are bringing out this divisive rhetoric? Because it's certainly not the Democrats as far as I can see. And I know I'm bringing my own biases to this, but just look at the data. But anyway, it just back to the point is that assassination attempt seems like a month ago. It seems like really old news, and that will not be what the Republicans would want. They would have wanted that to have stayed in the news cycles, to be helping Trump get a bounce off the back of it, and that interesting that if I got shot and nobody cared a week later, I too would be spiraling. This idea that Trump is going a bit nuts, because actually he should be in a place where the polls are absolutely killing it for the Republicans. Okay, I just want to point out a bit of typical Elon Musk double standards here. Even Elon Musk, one of Trump's biggest financial supporters, considers Trump to be too old to be the president. So Elon Musk said back in 2022 in July, Trump would be 82 at the end of term, which is too old to be chief executive of anything, let alone the United States of America. If DeSantis runs against Biden in 2024, then DeSantis will easily win. He doesn't even need to campaign. And this is, I think, Musk at the time, not being so pro-Trump as he is now. He's really got on board the Trump train and he's knees deep in this or more. And he was sort of hedging his bets there. But saying that Trump would be too old at the end of his term to be chief executive of anything, let alone the US, is to attack Trump for his age. And of course, he's now giving that same man $45 million a month. Now, this is a really interesting situation. Republican strategists realizing they've deliberately made this election about the cognitive decline of elderly men. So this is one of those things, chickens coming home to roost. This is going to bite the Republicans on the backside. They made this election about the cognitive decline of Joe Biden. And Joe Biden has now stepped out that not only have they lost that attack approach and their main kind of campaign thrust, but that can now be turned on themselves. So Donald Trump is now the oldest man, as I mentioned yesterday, ever to run for president, because Biden last cycle was younger than Trump is now. And Trump has had some serious glitches, as I showed you yesterday in that Lincoln Project video. There are just, there are lots of videos, montages of Trump's own cognitive decline and issues with language. And actually, those are more serious language issues than Biden's. There have been some psychological analyses done on the speech patterns between Trump and Biden. And Biden's has an aging brain whereby, he trails off or he he gets words mixed up, but he doesn't confuse the person. Whereas it is argued by some that Trump has got a demented brain, and actually dementia runs in his family, right? So not only is there a medical probability that Trump will get dementia, but also his brain is showing demented aspects. So he confuses people, not the names. So when he was talking about Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi and saying, well, Nikki Haley was in charge of security or whatever, it's like, no, like he was running against Nikki Haley at the time. No, that was literally Nancy Pelosi to do with January the 6th. You've confused not just the names here, like accidentally called Haley Pelosi. You've confused those two human beings. And then when you see the vocal things that he does with words, and making up words, or the way he finds his way around these problems, the origins, the beginnings, like that is what a demented brain does. That's actually an aspect of what I have sometimes, and I had some experience of this because I've got cognitive impairment through multiple sclerosis, which has similar elements to that, and my father is just this week actually been formally diagnosed, or last week actually, with dementia, right? So like I can tell you with some experience that certainly I would certainly go as far as to say that Biden does not have dementia, right? He's just an old man's brain. But I would argue he was too old to run for president, and I'm really glad he stepped down. But I would say that the elements of Trump's cognitive decline are actually categorically different in nature to Biden's issues. Now, whether that's dementia or whatever, I'm not necessarily saying that. But what I am saying for sure is that the Democrats now have permission and ammunition to go for the jugular on the old man approach, on the too old to run, on cognitive decline. Right, and Kamala Harris at 59 is markedly younger, and she might pick a VP who is young as well. They could just go on a massively young ticket. Now, JD Vance was chosen to kind of balance, I guess, Trump's age with youth there, but he's actually pretty inexperienced, JD Vance, in many respects. And it was, as I think, will end up being completely wrong pick, but we'll come to him a little later. It's just interesting that you will see the kind of old person approach. So that brings me on to a conversation about, well, okay, what is the approach from the Harris campaign going to be? Assuming she will be the pick, and the news is that she has got the delegates now, so those delegates are in the bag for her. Does that mean that there won't be any kind of open voting at the convention? Probably, if she's got enough delegates. I'm not sure that anyone is interested enough in going for it this time round to challenge her, and I don't think anyone would fancy their chances against Harris. So one of the successes of these last few days is this: no one was quite expecting how quickly the Democratic Party would coalesce around Harris. She has now received pretty much every, apart from Obama, everyone else has endorsed her. Like all the big names, all of her people that might run against her, they've all endorsed her, right? So she's got the entire mechanics of the party in terms of lawmakers, but she's also got the head of the parties in every state endorsing her. She's got over half the delegates now, and everyone's done that unbelievably quickly. I don't think you can overemphasize this. It's super important. You have a party that was ready for a change, and they were so ready for a change that they have jumped on the Harris wagon, and she now has wind behind her sails. She's got the party mechanics, and she's got the money, and so on and so forth. And we'll come on to some of these elements in a little bit. So that's all in place, and now it's going to be a case of like devising a campaign against Trump. And one of the things about Biden is that people were critical on his lack of going for the jugular in terms of Trump. Trump was there for the taking, and you can talk about the CNN debate that took place, where it should have been an absolute shoo-in for anyone who was moderately on their game to take Trump to pieces. Trump was useless in that, but he was good in comparison to Biden, who absolutely tanked it. And he wasn't on his game, but also he wasn't up for prosecutorially, if you like, prosecuting a case against Trump that was an anti-Trump case. So you are a felon. I would have said so many things that would have just been in Trump's face in that debate that would have put him on a back foot and expressed to the audience that, hang on, if you're not voting for me, you are voting for a convicted felon here. You are voting for a sexual abuser here. These are the points that need to be put across to the electorate in no uncertain terms. So the question is this the approach that Harris is going to have? And then you look at her first speech in Wilmington, and this was an absolute drop mic moment.
You know, as many of you know, before I was elected as vice president, before I was elected as United States Senator, I was the elected Attorney General, as I've mentioned, of California. Before that, I was a courtroom prosecutor. In those roles, I took on perpetrators of all kinds.
I just want to interrupt here because we've heard previously that she's not great at stunt speeches, that she's not very good at reading off a teleprompter, and you kind of go back 4 years, 5 years, and you look at her then. She's had 4 years of quietly getting on with being a vice president, and she's had practice, and she's come back now, and she seems to be perfectly good at doing these teleprompter speeches and pausing and knowing. And this was such a good layup. Like I'm used to prosecuting criminals, and everyone knows exactly where this is going. It's just brilliant.
Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
That delivery, the little things, that delivery was brilliant. It's like, you know what's coming. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type. And everyone's like, boom, you know, you've got the fraudster, you've got the sexual predator, you've got all of these connections that you've been laying that up. It's just perfect delivery.
And in this campaign, I will proudly put my record against his.
And let's break this down. Sorry to interrupt. I know you want to hear this, but you've already all heard this, right? So it's nothing new for you guys. She's saying, right, I'll put my record down. So she's then saying this campaign is going to be prosecutor against felon. If you are interested in the rule of law, which Republicans should be, right? That's what they've often campaigned on, right? If you're interested as an independent in the rule of law, then surely you should be better supporting the prosecutor over the felon. And this is what she's, look at our records.
As a young prosecutor, when I was in the Alameda County District Attorney's Office in California, I specialized in cases involving sexual abuse. Donald Trump was found liable by a jury for committing sexual abuse.
Boom.
As Attorney General of California, I took on one of our country's largest for-profit colleges and put it out of business. Donald Trump ran a for-profit college, Trump University, that was forced to pay $25 million to the students it scammed. As district attorney, to go after polluters, I created one of the first environmental justice units in our nation. Donald Trump stood in Mar-a-Lago and told big oil lobbyists he would do their bidding for a $1 billion campaign contribution. During the foreclosure crisis, I took on the big Wall Street banks and won $20 billion for California families, holding those banks accountable for fraud. Donald Trump was just found guilty of 34 counts of fraud.
That right there is the stuff of nightmares for Donald Trump.
And, you know, Brian Tyler Cohen there goes on to break that down himself. But, you know, that gives you an indication of what this campaign is now going to be. And you can now understand why Donald Trump might not want to debate Kamala Harris, why he's been talking about, oh, let's not have a debate. And he was actually really offensive in his saying, oh, well, I don't want an ABC debate. We need to be on neutral ground like Fox News. So he then wants to move it to Fox News because he's just got no guts, right? And you know, he calls George Stephanopoulos by a fake name, and he's like a child, essentially. But anyway, so that's this kind of stall that's been set out by the Harris campaign now, and you can see where this is going to go. And I think they're going to go hard, and you might as well go hard or go home. They've got ground to make up, and you're going to make up that ground by talking about Trump's criminality. That's going to be front and center. Keep repeating, he's a felon and he's a sexual abuser. Repeat. The audience need to be reminded of this very often. This is coming from, if you were a strategist to Democrats, you know, I'd assume that this is what they'd say. So felon, sexual abuser, and indeed fraudster as well, like Trump University. All of the stuff that she's just talked about, that needs to be repeated and repeated. You will be going on reproductive rights. You'll be going on Project 2025, reminding people all the time. And you also want to be talking about how Trump is beholden to corporate interests. This is something that independents and middle America are really, everyone, this is a really popular point, and actually not enough people talk about this, that if you appeal to the idea that Trump will be beholden, as he's already said, and she mentioned that there, that he had a big symposium with all of these oil and hydrocarbon interests, and basically said, you give me your support, you give me $1 billion, and I'll give you whatever policy you want. Which is, so they can take that back to the electorate and say, this is a guy that is beholden to big corporate interests. Right, we're going to look after, you know, you're talking about free school meals or whatever it is. I don't know the equivalent terminology in the US, but talking about support for really young children in education and things that the Democrats are trying to do. You know, we're going to appeal to stuff that's important to you as young parents and this and that. We aren't going to be just acting on behalf of corporate interests, and so you're going to see lots of that kind of campaigning, I think, where they're going to be differentiating themselves from a Trumpian approach by showing that they're out for middle America. And she actually mentioned in her speech yesterday in Wilmington, talking about middle America again, and the middle class America. So I think that they have every opportunity to catch up in the polls by campaigning strong and hard, but also sensibly as well. So when we look at the polls, there's almost no point looking at the polls because they're just not going to be good enough. They're either done before Harris has taken over, and so therefore they're based on hypotheticals. Like, okay, right now we're Biden against thingy, but if Harris was going to run, what would you think? And people are like, yeah, whatever, not really interested. And they're always going to put lower than they would otherwise. Now she's there and invigorating the base, you get very different polling. So the polling is not there yet. There hasn't been long enough with Harris being at the helm for people to have been asked and for that data to have been recorded and presented. But there are some coming out. So Harris is overperforming Biden by 4 points according to a new Morning Consult poll. So let's have a very quick look at this. Just in comparison to Biden, you've got Harris is 2 points behind Trump, and where Biden is 6 points behind Trump overall, right? So that's a 4-point shift towards Harris. Males, there's a 7-point difference in favor of Harris. Female, interestingly, as a 2-point difference, so a lot smaller So actually more males have shifted towards Harris than females, although there's still a 2% change. Biden's traditionally been quite good with the female vote. Liberals, obviously, but also moderates too. And this is your important one. So there you've got a 9-point shift from Biden to Harris with moderates. Very, very important. Democrats, obviously 6-point shift, but independents, an 11-point shift. So we talked yesterday in a live stream about it's all about the people in the middle, your independents and your swing voters and your never Trumper Republicans. Can you get them on board? So with Republicans, interestingly, more people don't like Harris. Biden was more popular among Republicans. This will be partly because Harris has been absolutely excoriated over time in a way that, yes, Biden has, but there's still Biden's a white man. Harris is a woman of color, and Biden's been around for a long time, so he's still, even though he's been on the wrong end of the Republican party shtick, he still has that purchase with many particularly old school Republicans. So Biden has that advantage, yeah. But I think that's more than compensated with mobilizing the Democrats and getting that independent demographic over to Harris more likely than with Biden. Let's continue looking at these demographics where we have college up to college. So college education is your top here. So interesting that both Biden and Harris way below in college educated people. So there's a 7-point difference. Harris improving by 7 points there. That's very important. But it also shows that really there is a correlation between educational levels and Democrat appeal, and in this case both Biden and Harris over Trump. So Trump does better with college educated people, and Biden and Harris both do better with college graduates. So that's below college, so less than college, isn't it? And then college graduates get a slight improvement. Biden and Harris have an advantage over Trump. And then graduates, so university degrees and above, get a much bigger bump for both Biden and Harris. In fact, they're level pegging both of those two at plus 20 over Trump. So there is a really strong educational shift, and this has been known for a long time, right? There's no surprise here. But yeah, so for college grads, Harris gets a 2-point bump over Biden and a 7-point bump over Biden in the less educated, sort of under college level education. And then with blacks, we have Biden goes from 39 with Biden up to 54. So that's a 15-point bump for Harris. And then whites gets a 3-point bump. They're below for much further back whites than these other demographics. Trump, it has the advantage with the white contingent. And then Hispanics, we get a bump from +4 for Biden up to +8 for Harris. So you put all of these together and you think, right, this is the beginning of the campaign. So Harris, I'm fairly sure, will only get stronger from now on in as she gets more and more airtime. That will be good. That these, she would hope, would translate into a bigger chunk of the vote and more ability to beat Trump than Biden. And I think we can, if this is accurate, then this looks like clearly the choice to replace Biden with Harris, or the choice for Biden to step back has been a sensible one, because she gets the advantage over Biden in virtually every single demographic there. And if not the advantage, then it's just level pegging. I don't think there's a single one where she loses to Biden. No, she doesn't. So she's at least level on every single category. Oh yeah, it's Republicans. Sorry, Republicans was the only one, which, you take that, right? So we've got can Kamala Harris beat Trump? Here's what the polls show, and this is in Time magazine, I think, actually, even though it's on MSN here. So the Democratic Party appears to be injected with new energy following the decision for Joe Biden to step down. She raised a record-breaking $81 million within 24 hours. Actually, it's over $100 million now. And interestingly, of that money there, it was 888,000 small donations. I think the maximum can be 2,900. So I've heard is it Lara Trump on Fox saying that these are big money donors? These aren't. It's literally impossible to be. The ActBlue one, I think, caps it at 2,900. These are all small donors, and I think the average, if you divide that by the number of people, it's something. I think the average is something like $90 or something. I may be wrong there, but the idea is that this has mobilised an awful lot of people, and 60% had never donated before. I don't think, or certainly not in this campaign. The last 4 years, I think that's how it's equated, but that means you've got new people coming on board and being energized enough to want to do that. So this is a huge movement, and this is something that the Republicans need to be worried about, because actually she's done what Biden was unable to do, which is to mobilize and energize the base. A slight majority of Americans have a negative opinion of Harris, according to 538 polling. Actually, if you listen to 538, I listened to their podcast the other night. They said this is to do with her not being out there. So you will always, if you are not like the president, as a vice president, you are going to have just a lower favorability rating almost by default. Citing polls conducted before Biden dropped out. So some 51% of Americans disapprove of Harris to 38% who approve. Trump has a higher disapproval. So 53% disapprove of Trump and 39% people approve of him. And bearing in mind, that's her starting point before she had taken over, if she is indeed going to be the nominee. Which means that those figures will definitely go up. So her approval ratings will definitely go up due to the mere exposure effect. So getting on TV, like that speech yesterday at Wilmington will have done her absolute wonders for approval ratings. Now, the problem Trump faces is that he is deeply, deeply unpopular. So he's super popular with the people over here, like I've said to you many times before, but those people aren't enough to get him voted in. He needs to attract people in the middle. His approval ratings need to go up across different demographics. And his issue is that he, in a very overconfident way, took on a vice president, J.D. Vance, who would just be a replication of himself, and that doesn't expand his base. So she, Kamala Harris, will take on someone that will expand her base. So she will be able to now, because of Trump's overconfidence, because he thought he was going to run against Biden, he just picked someone just like him, is now going to regret that. And he's stuck now with J.D. Vance. And apparently, some insiders are saying that he's already regretting that, which is correct. He should regret it. It's a bad decision, strategically bad decision. So she will be able to make a good choice to be able to expand her base. So someone like Josh Shapiro to get Pennsylvania and that neck of the woods, or maybe Gary Cooper from is it North Carolina to someone that's really quite like a white man of a certain age who speaks with a southern accent, Andy Bashir as well. So those kind of people could be really good for expanding that base. So you've got a woman of color of a certain age, 59. You've got a slightly older one in Cooper, I think, or a younger one in Andy Bashir. You've got options to be able to expand that base, to tick off these boxes, to then go and appeal to a wider audience. Aggregated election polls show Harris lagging behind the former president by a small but not insurmountable margin of 1.5 percentage points on average, according to analysis done by Washington Post of 11 different pollsters. These figures are only a slight improvement on Joe Biden, who trails by 1.9%. However, of all the polls were conducted before Biden's dropout announcement, so basically I would just forget them as being essentially irrelevant. They're like a slight guide, maybe, and the fact that she's already above before polling was taken of Biden dropping, before Biden dropped out. This is looking good for, I think, for Harris, to be fair. Surveys about the potential performance are done that are done on hypothetical candidates are often inaccurate, which is what they would have been. And it goes through these different polls and looks at how Harris does against Trump in comparison to Biden. And I think generally, the sense for me is that things will get better. So she is close enough to Trump to be able to think that this is definitely something she could win. Now, polls taken on the 18th, this one, so that's 5 days ago. So again, these are going to change in Harris's favour because now she's in the limelight. But 5 days ago, she had 52% of women voters, Trump had 47%. Black voters, 76 against 21%. And voters from 18 to 29, 62% against 37%. So if she can eat into some of those numbers, then suddenly things start looking rosier for Harris. And she looks at possibly, if you can mobilize, if she gets excitement and mobilizes the black and brown vote and the young vote in these swing states particularly, then she's really in with a chance. Now, on the other hand, beating Trump won't be easy. His favorability rating is higher now than it has ever been. Interesting that he's got a higher favorability rating, but that will, as I mentioned, that will be something to do with these favorability ratings would have been taken over the last sort of week or so. That will be to do with the assassination attempt and the RNC bump. Right, so he will. This should be the highest. He certainly in the campaign. Up till now, this point should be the highest they've ever been up till now because of those two points. So it doesn't surprise me that his favorability ratings are personally higher for him than they've been. Harris May poll is better than Biden did against Trump, but Trump is running 5 points ahead nationally against her. There's lots to discuss in these, but I would. You can spend a lot of time discussing these, and I have done, but actually we need to wait a couple of weeks for more polling to come out. Just the last few bits on polling, that there's a few, oh my goodness, loads of updates have happened. Now, we'll come to that later. I just want to go to some other polling news, which is, so this one, Morning Consult is out, so that's one that I showed you the breakdown of. One of the first polls taken since Joe Biden ended his re-election bid, and shows Kamala Harris with more support in her matchup against Trump than the president had. The Republican nonetheless has the edge, but it's a smaller one than when Biden was on the ballot. And in its survey taken following Biden's exit from the race, Morning Consult found that Trump had 47, Harris 45, a gap of only 2%. Biden Trump by 6 percentage points. So she's already got a 4% advantage over Biden in the Morning Consult poll. Harris's campaign appears to have given Democrats a spark of enthusiasm. With 27%, they are much more motivated to participate in the political process compared to 24% for Republicans. Now, that is a kind of mobilization thing. So if that translates into more Democrats mobilizing than Republicans, then you that's some more good news. And this is then also reflected in the campaign fundraising, which has been literally record breaking. So again, some good news there for Harris. I'm not trying to shield for her. I'm just, these are it's all good news at the moment. There's nothing that's gone wrong for her at the moment. She's going to visit these battleground states. Another poll, 12 minutes ago, I haven't read this one. Another poll of Kamala Harris's support has been released, with this one showing the vice president with a slight lead over Donald Trump. Reuters Ipsos survey conducted on Monday and Tuesday following Joe Biden's departure from the race showed her with a 44% national vote and above Trump's 42%. The previous survey taken, that's just disappeared. Previous survey taken before Biden suspended his campaign showed Harris tied with Trump at 44%. So a 2% shift already within the margin of error, right? So interesting. And then we're going to go to another poll as well. And we've got, top Democrats are endorsing her. So as I said, all looks like good news at the moment. This is it. So another poll. This one, another poll taken partly after Joe Biden suspended his re-election campaign, was found a tied race between Harris and Trump. So Quinnipiac University reports 49% of registered voters nationally support Trump, 47% Harris. Basically a tie, they say, because it's within the margin of error. So slight lead for Trump there, 2% lead. The poll was conducted from Friday last week through to Sunday, so that's a bit of an interesting one. Biggest finding is that independents prefer Trump overall. He has 55% from the critical group compared to 41% for Harris. But again, you go back to talk about, yes, it is all about the independents and these people in the centre, but it is too early to see the effect. Of course it is. She's only just announced that she's running, right? So again, you would expect these things to shift. And yeah, the money, as I've already talked about, the small donations coming in from a phenomenal number of people is absolutely incredible. And then Phillips O'Brien says, well, maybe there was some pent-up excitement waiting to be released. And this is exactly what's happened. I watched last night, actually, it was a really good BBC News channel, the news channel, not like BBC One, the news on there, but the actual BBC News channel had a really long running, like it was on for hours and hours, where they had panels of particularly Democrat strategists talking about what the ramifications were and what the strategy should be. It was absolutely fascinating, really top quality, great insight. And there's one, what was her name, Lara Lee or something. So they had someone who was a Hispanic Democrat strategist, and they had someone who was of Asian origin, but she was also involved in fundraising, and she was saying that she had just got off the phone to 7-figure donors and 6-figure donors, so hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars. She's like, I've just got off the phone for 2 of them, and they are like well up for this now. They've been waiting for this, and this is the permission that they wanted. So there is not only your small level donors, but your big dollar donors that are just like, now we're ready. I've got loads of money, and it's burning a hole in my pocket, and this is the permission we've been needed. So there has been this energizing of the base and of the donors as well, that has now means that with that, what is it, $96 million she had plus $100 million, there's people talking about $200 million war chest they've got, and it looks like now you're back in a position where the Democrats now are able to vastly outspend the Republicans, and if that can translate, if they can do very focused campaigns in these 6 battleground states particularly, and also sort of shift it back in their favor in places like Virginia, New Hampshire, New Mexico, then suddenly, it is back on. That's the claim here. So here we have Kamala Harris's fundraising reaching over a record-breaking $100 million in less than 48 hours. Absolutely incredible. And also worth noting this, so once Biden announced he was stepping aside, Democratic voters quickly mobilized around Harris. I talked about that. Over 44,000 people joined a Sunday video call hosted by a group called Win with Black Women, which lasted well past midnight, and according to organizers, netted more than $1.5 million for the Harris campaign. So again, it's these key demographics that are going to be super, super important, that she seems to be on course to court and curry favor with. Kamala Harris secures enough delegate endorsements to win. So I've mentioned that. So 3,800 delegates what are needed from all these different states around the country. And you could go to an open primary and you'd have to basically get the most delegate votes. But if she... I don't know the exact rules around this, but I presume if she gets enough delegate support right now, then that might be enough of a mandate to say, I think the DNC rules people are meeting today. But I assume that if she gets over 50% of the delegates pledging their support to her now, then it's like, right, okay, that means you've effectively got to win. So we're not going to have an open primary. We're just going to take that. And the disadvantage is she won't get that Democratic mandate from the party, so that she gets to win above other people, and you put them in a ring and get them to fight it out, and then people vote on it. That's not going to happen. So it's a bit of a coronation, but it still is democratic. Like there's still the delegates are pledging. They're not being forced to pledge, although I'm sure there are lots of conversations going on in the back rooms. But so that's a disadvantage. The advantage is she can start campaigning now with the knowledge that she is the one, and she can pick her VP now and just get on and do it. And the advantage of being able to have an extra month of campaigning with your VP will be huge. So the VPs are being vetted by the kind of legal eagles who are looking into whether any of them have any skeletons in their closet. They're basically being vetted, and she'll get a recommendation that this is the cleanest, this is the next one, and then I guess she'll pick from that whether she can overcome the advice of those. I don't know. I presume she can, but it would come with risks, right? But she'll have all the options upwards we talked about yesterday. Although I didn't mention Pete Buttigieg. So Pete Buttigieg being gay, you might think, well, a woman of colour and a gay person might be really difficult to win over certain elements of the electorate. But as Scaramucci says, Anti-Scaramucci says, the Democrats have won always when they've gone for high risk. I did talk about this actually. So he could be in with a shout because actually he doesn't need to be replaced anywhere in terms of like, if you take Andy Beshear, Roy Cooper, or Josh Shapiro, or Gretchen Whitmer, then you have to replace them in their seats, and you're going to have to replace them with a relative unknown who won't get that kind of name recognition or won't have that relationship with their voters, and so you might struggle in those seats in those districts to get Democrat voted in there. Whereas Pete Buttigieg is in charge of infrastructure, and so he wouldn't, he'll be a very sensible choice in that respect. But because he's very good. He'd be very good in debate. He's just incredibly eloquent and on point with everything he says at the moment. So he's a good talker, but it could be just the idea that, as a gay man married with 2 kids to his male spouse, obviously, might be too much modernity for some to cope with. CNN's John King correctly noted that Josh Shapiro, so he's a Pennsylvania governor, isn't he? Not senator. Well, anyway, correctly noted that Josh Shapiro won't be picked because a significant portion of the Democratic base has a problem with Jews. Beshear and Cooper aren't winning their home states for the ticket, but Kelly would provide Dems a much-needed boost in Arizona. He's also serious on foreign policy and national security. So this is an interesting point, says Colby Badwa, and John King, really. Josh Shapiro, being Jewish and being really strong on Israel, might be a little too controversial for some of those Democrats who they want to keep in the fold if they try and be very delicate with the way that they navigate the Israel-Gaza conflict. They've lost people, say, up in Dearborn and other places that have strong Muslim communities or really left-wing, who might go for a third-party ticket, might be a Cornel West vote because the Democrats have been too friendly with Israel. Now, and in fact, Netanyahu's over in Washington at the moment, isn't he? So having Josh Shapiro on a ticket, most people are saying he's the number one, and I said he's probably the most probable to be selected. But actually, that could be something in favour of someone like Mark Kelly. Now, I'd also love to see Mark Kelly. I'd probably love to see him more. I was just thinking of other reasons why you might, because the Pennsylvania vote is so important. But Mark Kelly would be really good for national security and for Ukraine, big time. Right. Here we have so my advice to the Republicans would be, for what it's worth, you don't need my advice at all, of course, but the Republicans are in really serious danger of making a very bad mistake. And this is the mistake. So this is it Tim Burchett here, who's an interesting fella anyway, saying exactly the wrong thing. Typical MAGA thing to say, but the wrong thing if you want to win the election.
First, he's going to hire a black female for vice president, and that he just skipped over. What about white females? What about any other group. It just when you go down that route, you take mediocrity, and that's what they have right now as a vice president.
Are you suggesting she was a DEI hire?
100%. She was a DEI hire.
So the whole DEI thing. So it was only on the qualities initiative that she was, diversity and equalities, that she got that job. She was mediocre. She only got that job because Biden said, I want a black woman. Now, whether or not that's true, it's irrelevant, right? If you are going to start the campaign season, which is kind of right now, you know who you're up against. Let's assume it's Kamala Harris, right? And you're saying she's only there because she's black and a woman, right? You are going to get, and I saw, Van Jones on CNN did a really good takedown of this, man. He's like, man, you don't want to do this. If you do that, you then mobilize the black vote entirely to vote for Kamala Harris. They then get protective about that. It is just such a bad decision. And I would assume someone is going to give him a rap on the knuckles, or if they do go down that route, then this will become an identity led election whereby the Republicans are just going to, talk about her identity as a woman of color, and you do that, and it just will not end well for you. I'm sure. So. I thought that was an odd choice for Tim Burchett, but not at all unsurprising. But I would say that it is ill-advised, that's for sure. And then we go to look at, for example, we look at JD Vance. So with a candidate switch, it's worth remembering that JD Vance is a major advocate of menstrual surveillance, local cops having the right to pull OBGYN, so your gynecologist records, to see who and who isn't menstruating and who might be planning a trip to an abortion right state. Okay, this point is that JD Vance it was picked because they were super confident, but he's as harsh as you possibly can be about abortion, right? It's like no exceptions for rape and incest. And actually, we're going to go and look at OBGYN records and we're going to talk about menstruation, surveilling menstruation cycles and so on and so forth to make sure everyone is having babies. Everyone needs to be having babies, etc., etc. Like we're getting to Handmaid's Tale type stuff. So this is who they've chosen now. And what the Harris campaign will be able to do is mobilize on account of that, right? They're going to get a lot of women and young voters, male and female, to recognize that this is your Handmaid's Tale type of administration. And if you want Project 2025 to be the state of affairs in the country, and if you want a complete anti-reproductive rights approach to life in this country, then that's who you're voting for if you vote these guys. Now, Trump can all he likes say, oh, it's states' rights. I put it down to states. It wasn't me, but on the other hand, I did overturn Roe v. Wade, and all the legal scholars wanted that. It's like, did they? Name me one of them. Name me one legal scholar. Maybe a couple on the SCOTUS, on the Supreme Court, but name me anyone. You're talking rubbish. So that's what we'll try and sell. It's a states thing. But JD Vance is deep in on that. He's deep in on that. And so this is, again, like an easy win, I think, for the Republicans in general. Because if you look at national polling data on abortion, most people are for abortion of some sort. And so this is, and I don't think Harris is afraid to talk about it and even label it abortion. So, JD Vance, I think, some people are worrying that he is the bad pick, especially when you start hearing stuff like this.
Saying is that we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it? Saying
Which is a really interesting position that he's taking. So JD Vance says women who haven't got given birth, like Kamala Harris, are childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and have no direct stake in America. So there's about 30 million women over the age of 35 who have not given birth. And he's essentially saying that they're all childless cat ladies. So straight away, you're saying to 30 million people, we don't value you. I don't value you as a potential vice president. I don't value you. I mean, this is just an insane way to go and try and campaign. It's just absolutely ridiculous. Now, as someone very well pointed out, who hasn't got children? Taylor Swift, one of the most powerful women in America, you might argue. And the Republicans were petrified of her this cycle endorsing the Democrats. Now, she hasn't quite done that, but she did cast her opinions in the last election, and it was incredibly important for getting people out to vote, to register. And she's got the youth vote, but actually she's gone beyond that now. She's a bit of a national hero. Hell hath no fury like a certain childless cat lady who has yet to endorse a presidential candidate, says Anna Bauer here. And that is incredibly important. So, like, there are ways to conduct a campaign, and what we've seen from Tim Burchett in saying, "Oh, this is a DEI appointment," and you've got JD Vance talking about childless cat ladies. You're like, this week is going exceptionally well for the Harris campaign. You couldn't make a worse decision. And then you've got, I mean, goodness me, I edited a book by James Lindsay once, and I've interviewed him twice when he was at the other end of the political spectrum and was just a really interesting, lovely guy. And then he got involved in wokeness, and then he's like all the way over there. And now this is what he says. So James Lindsay says, let's talk about Kamala Harris. So I even consulted on one of the further book he wrote. Anyway, let's talk about Kamala Harris, saying, to see what can be unburdened by what has been. This phrase, which she repeats all the time, is not mysterious. It's esoteric. That's it. It's a cult. It's a Marxist and Luciferian incantation. And that's easily seen. Really? So anyway, that's James Lindsay. That's his approach, which is this kind of demonization that we've seen from the Russians already have talked about Kamala Harris being like distilled evil. As someone here says, conservatives, Kamala is a satanic witch. Me, I'm already voting for her. No need to make her sound even cooler than she already is. Like, just, yeah, I just don't get where this doubling down on this kind of campaigning rather than going on policy. And is it because they don't have good policy? Is it because actually they can't reach most of the electorate with decent, sensible stuff that's going to make the electorate better off in terms of education, in terms of the environment, in terms of workers' rights, in terms of money in their pocket? Is it literally like we want tax cuts for the rich, Elon Musk and Peter Thiel are just funding us, and you guys are only there because you're childless cat ladies and you're a person of colour, and you're only there because of DEI? And like, if that's how you're going to campaign, you will get your 40% of people over there, but you won't get enough. You won't get the majority that you need. And it's just really stunted thinking here from the Republicans. They need to go to the centre and appeal to why people are going out to vote. And it's all becoming about identity politics in terms of like, oh, wokeness and this and that, and rather than policy. And so going back to Harris, she will be campaigning hard on actual policy, things like reproductive rights, but also talking about the economic success of the Biden administration in doing an awful lot of stuff that's been really, really successful in bringing the American economy under control and have it performing way better than anyone else in the world. So, and they can talk about things like education, the policies that they've already been talking about previously, and taking the successes they've had and taking that further on. You know, if you're interested in the environment, right, like, the Republicans are never going to talk to you on that. He's gone to the hydrocarbons industries to say, oh, give me $1 billion and I'll make whatever decisions you like. And straight away, anyone that's interested in the environment is off your electorate. Right, okay, let's think about women who are interested in reproductive rights. Yeah, well, you're either childless cat ladies or you're never going to be allowed an abortion and it's going to be Handmaid's Tale. Okay, well, that's them gone. Okay, is there anyone else you want to piss off? Oh, right, so it's DI, it's just a DI appointment. Well, there's black people and Hispanics. Okay, anyone else? Like, it's just they're cutting down just by saying these stupid things, and just they're just retreating to this very small area of the electorate over here that isn't going to win them an election. And it's just not sensible. Like, yes, I'm a lefty, obviously, but if I was a lefty and I was advising the Republicans strategically on how to do a campaign, like, I would do a much better, I could do a much better job of that campaign than they're doing now. And it's just incredible. Yeah, you could have a little bit of elements of culture war stuff. You're always going to get that with the right. But it needs to be the frilly stuff that's growing out of a solid base of decent policy that you can take to the electorate and say, this is what we're going to be strong on. Even if it's foreign policy, we're going to be really strong on Russia. Like, the Republicans could have done that. They would have done that 40 years ago. They're not doing it now. They're isolationists running away from Russia and support for Ukraine. And so you would, it's just all, they're just trying to get by on a Trump 2.0. And I'm not sure that's enough. And then you've got Trump then coming out with quotes like this. So the Biden-Harris administration did not properly protect me. So this is the Secret Service, right? And I was forced to take a bullet for democracy. It was my great honor to do so, says Donald Trump. Now, actually, she's resigned now. She was under a bipartisan investigation, or she's in front of a hearing today. She didn't do very well, Kimberly Cheetle, in charge of the Secret Service. But it must be remembered that there's never once been a Democrat in charge of the Secret Service in the history of the Secret Service, as far as I'm aware. So every single appointment has always been a Republican. So you can have a go at her, mate, but, she's one of yours. But yeah, I mean, it's easy to blame, I guess, the government for those mistakes, but that sounds to me like an organisational, procedural issue that was taking place on a day. And in fact, one of the best questions was asked by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, even Trent Telenko, and there's some right wingers who were like, yeah, this is a really good question. She said in where is it? Is it here? No, it's not. It's this one. So AOC unexpectedly asked Secret Service Director a good question. This is a Matrix-like moment. I mean, actually, she's very good in these select hearings. But anyway, the individual used an AR-15 in order to act out his assassination attempt. An AR-15 has a range of 400 to 600 yards. My question is, why is the Secret Service protected perimeter shorter than one of the most popular semi-automatic weapons in the United States? And so what I'm hearing is that the perimeter was not established outdoors in an outdoor venue, and that would prevent an AR-15, which is one of the most common weapons used in mass shootings, from being able to be within the range of the Secret Service protection. There you go. So anyway, she's ended up resigning, and that's probably the end of that. But there was actually quite hardcore bipartisan. I think Jamie Raskin and James Comer, like Democrat Republican, sent a letter asking for her to resign. So she was not popular across both parties, and she's gone. And I don't think that there's an awful lot of mileage that the Republicans can get in that to campaign on the back of that. So again, the assassination now seems like an awful long time ago, and it's resulted in someone resigning due to a bipartisan challenge of her competence and the competence of her organisation. So yeah, anyway, that's a lot of me talking. In fact, an hour and 8 minutes of me talking. Thank you if you've got through all of this. That's just my update of what's been going on. I'm not going to be doing this every day. Of course I'm not. But occasionally I will pop in and say, okay, this is where I think it's going. But I will be coming at this from a biased point of view. But hopefully I'm presenting you actual, tangible arguments and rationale and facts, not just like completely trying to propagandize. I'm not trying to propagandize. I'm like, this is who I want to win, and this is what they should do to win. And these guys I don't want to win, but this is what they should do if they want a fighting chance. And actually, I mean, they have got a fighting chance. They're still the favourites, the Republicans. Although I did say Biden was going to win, but that was before he started really deteriorating. And I think that changed. That was the ceteris paribus invalidation. So all things remaining equal, I think Biden would have won from like 4 months ago. But then he started like falling apart at the seams. I'm like, okay, that's not all things remaining equal. He has deteriorated. So now we're on a different trajectory. Then you had Trump taking over, and now you got Harris in the zone. And I think she's got a very good chance of being able to win this. In fact, I said yesterday on Facebook, Harris will win. There, I've said it. I think she will win. It's not going to be easy, but I can foresee her mobilizing enough. If she gets a good, sensible VP pick. JD Vance is not good. It's not good for getting Trump elected. He's lacking charisma. His talk last night about Diet Mountain Dew and racism was just bizarre and crap. He's just like not charismatic. Someone like Josh Shapiro would blow him out of the water. And so I think there are chances for the Harris ticket to get in. And then if you're talking about things like Ukraine, then that will benefit Ukraine, I think, much more than a JD Vance Trump ticket. And it's not just those two. It's Stephen Miller, it's Steve Bannon, it's Elbridge Colby, and all these other people around the edges who are like deeply anti-Ukraine support. So I will advocate Harris and whoever it is on account of not only their domestic policies, but particularly their Ukraine policies, which I'm sure will be better than the Republicans. Anyway, that's enough from me. Hopefully I haven't offended too many Republicans. Challenge me. If you disagree with my points, challenge me with respect, and we'll have a discussion. Take care and speak to you soon.